Hey, Discern listeners, 90 Day Fiancé, The Last Resort. Let's check it out.
Place in a past lifetime. Until we're aware of why we choose these certain roles that we have in life, you can't change anything without awareness.
Petey, I think she looks like who?
Jenny. Yeah.
And Sumit, yeah. Maybe she was Jenny in a past life.
I think, was someone else saying this? Who else was saying this? Was my wife saying this? I didn't see it immediately, but, and then when people said it, I was like, well, I guess long, straight, gray, white hair. But seeing side by side, yeah, I mean, they really picked pictures that exemplified their similarities.
We have no idea what I'm getting myself into, but I'm excited because she'll often tell me, oh, you had to be a king in my past life. And I told her she was like Cleopatra, like ruling people and chopping off heads.
Yeah, it's always Cleopatra. I think half of the past life regressions currently result in women being identified as reincarnations of Cleopatra, which, maybe reincarnation works that way where you can be reincarnated as millions and millions of people, but they're not saying that, but I'm just saying that that's the cliche.
Gnosis. And I know the moment the lips start quivering, that is the sign that Ed is up far enough to be able to talk to me and tell me about the past life he's in.
I've been here before. I have a elf, a leprechaun costume and
elf costume or a leprechaun costume, and he's alive and he's buried. Well, I'm curious to see what Petey will do with this.
Of all of the past life regressions I've done, I don't think I've ever had a leprechaun, honestly. But my purpose is to access the subconscious, because then Ed is able to identify his soul lessons, why we are here.
Right. So I can get behind that last statement, because like with the dream work that I do, I will absolutely know that I don't know if we're actually correctly analyzing the dream or if we're just giving the client permission to explore something that could have been explored through other means, just by asking them to think about their day or something. Because she's saying, I don't know if we're talking about a past life, but the real purpose is to try to get to the unconscious. What do you mean? What does she mean by the unconscious? What do I mean by the unconscious? And soul lessons, but those are all phrases that I think would essentially be the kind of work that I do. It's not necessarily exactly the way it looks in my office, but in terms of helping people to figure out who they are, what their needs are, what sort of issues they need to work on, what feelings they might be repressing, what topics they might be avoiding, that kind of stuff. So she just, I think, indicated that, look, that's really what we're trying to get at, and we just use the past life discussion as a way of getting there, then yeah, good. Because, there's another direction that this could go where, I don't know, she says, you were a king and you deserve more respect. There's a lot of different paths that you could take with this. But if I think it's going in the direction it's going, then yeah, it's great.
In this lifetime. And then I'm able to do the healing with him. Do you know what year it is?
1669. I was small. I was like a dwarf.
I don't know if he's trolling her or not, because I wouldn't put it past him. Or if he is seeing some kind of vision, some inner person of him, right? Some inner representation of himself. I don't know. A buried alive leprechaun in 1669.
That big.
Like a dwarf.
Like a performer in a circus. They would hang me upside down in metal shoes.
Another therapeutic method to get at material like this that doesn't have anything to do with the supernatural is sand tray work or art therapy or just visualization work. You can ask people to just make up a story, or free association, what the Freudians used to do. And you ask someone to just concentrate on something and then just tell me the images that pop into your head. And then use that as a basis for exploration too. You know, you could argue that this probably is something along those lines, essentially.
And I would spin. I would entertain people. People would laugh. People would laugh at me.
So yeah, that does fit to some extent with the way that he is and the way that he acts, and I think the way that he sees himself. That he feels pathetic, that he feels like a fool, that he's doomed because of his stature or his ridiculousness, and he's separate and other people are superior, he's inferior, but he's the performer and everyone's looking at him. You know, that does represent the hypothesis that I would explore if I had a client that presented like him.
I was alone. I was a lonely performer.
Okay.
And they threw me in a hole. They threw me away.
What was the soul lesson that came through?
I don't know if he's just playing it for the cameras or there's shenanigans or he's literally trolling her. 1669, I'm a leprechaun. Who knows? Or if he is legit trying to describe the vision he has in his head, and it is a representation of an inner representation of himself. But if it's somewhere in the legit zone, this is interesting that he's saying this, because it is, I think, the way that I have been hypothesizing about him. You know, there's a victimization that he feels. There's an inferiority that he feels. There's a discounting, a throwing away, right? And the way that his life looks, at least in the edit, no one is throwing him away. He will provoke other. If anything, Liz, when she should have departed a long time ago, is holding on to him tooth and nail for, through thick and thin. And so he's not being thrown away, but he feels that way based on his past. And he also feels like a fool. It's pretty interesting. I might even use this metaphor moving forward, and I would do that with clients, and maybe she does as well, as a touchstone for a particular part of who he is, of his psyche and his traumas. Like if he were to be telling me that he had a fight last night or something, and he was really upset and he was trying to advocate for himself, this is his narrative, and I would say, so did you feel like you were the fool being thrown down the pit? That kind of thing. And who knows, maybe some clients would be like, what? Oh, that thing? So you work with clients around those. But it can be a powerful metaphor to use as a way of describing something very quickly that is very deep and very complicated.
That lifetime on into the cell memories of this lifetime again.
That I'm not loved.
Yes. So now you see him. Do you see him with compassion?
Yes.
Send that love to him.
Yeah. I mean, you can look at this from one angle, that it's supernatural and unscientific and an odd belief system, or what is it doing? What's the function? What's the outcome? And I would say that if Ed just sat down and had a conversation, he might not get to this place as raw and vulnerable as it is. Now, I think it goes way beyond this, actually. You could argue that this leprechaun fool being thrown down a well, I've been hypothesizing about different modes that he and Liz will go into, and so this would be that temporary I'm lesser mode. And in narcissism, and I'm not diagnosing him, but we will split off, people will split off that there will be a part of them that will feel very inferior and very discounted and very thrown away and worthless, and it's just a done deal. No one will ever love me. And then that will become split off. That part of awareness and emotions and perceiving and of the self will be submerged, depending, but sometimes it can be completely submerged and out of the awareness of the person. And they have this other part of themselves that believes that they're special and superior and the best. And that part is trying to counteract the other part. It's also trying to distract them. It feels better than the other part. But when that can't be sustained and they're being criticized or rejected, all the defensive structure starts to crumble. And then they end up identifying with that other split off part where they feel ridiculous. And the temptation is to believe, well, okay, that's good that he is going to a vulnerable place, that he's talking about feeling hurt and thrown away and rejected and alone. That's better than the grandiose, dismissive mode that he is in most of the time. But both modes have their problems. There's an integration of these modes. There's an even deeper reality that I have found for clients. A deeper reality, that's not the way to put it. Because there's even as people with narcissism will describe their pain, they will often do it in a histrionic, narcissistic way. It's still within that, self-centered way of looking at things. Like this, I'm a victim, and no one loves me, and people are going to throw me away. It's still not actually looking outside of the self, not relying, not trusting that they can look outside the self, not admitting that they might play a role. Because in this metaphor that he's using, he's not saying, well, I at one time was allowed to be in the castle, but because of my actions, they threw me away. There's nothing like that. It's still not acknowledging that he plays a role, right? And that's a part of the condition, is just a real difficult time even evaluating the role that you play. It feels very punitive and victimizing, because that's the way it was when they were young, because they weren't playing a role when they were 3 years old. And so that just gets locked in their schema.
Figured it out.
Yeah.
Thanks to getting a partner that is so supportive and accepting.
And I almost want to sabotage. So instead of letting her break my heart, I want to break hers so I can walk away more powerful. I know.
Yeah. So he's saying this. I'm guessing this isn't the first time he said it. We know he's been in therapy a lot. And he is now admitting that. Is this his other side? Does he actually understand this? Or is he just saying the words and it's not really felt by him as he's saying the words? Because if you really feel these words, then you'd think you would see different sorts of behavior, not necessarily when he's triggered, but after being triggered, you'd think there would be a different set of behaviors, different treatment of Liz, right? So what's going on? Did he just suddenly make a revelation? It doesn't look like that to me. But yeah, that is absolutely one way of saying it. He believes that he is nothing and rejectable, like the leprechaun being thrown down the well. And he is afraid of being rejected, so he will self-sabotage and he will reject preemptively so that he can avoid being rejected, so that he can feel like the powerful one, so he can feel like the superior one and the better one. Yeah. I mean, the fact that he even said that he wants to be the powerful one, I think is, at the very least, the fact that he said it is satisfying.
Walk away more powerful. I know that sounds sad, but...
But you wouldn't be more powerful.
No.
You would be more sad.
I know. Past life regression. I mean, it was scary. I was made to feel different and inferior, but...
He described the process earlier as well, what it felt like. And he said that he was awake, but he felt not really awake. And yeah, that's that state that hypnosis can provide. Not for everybody, but it can. And appears he, went to that state. He has control. He is awake. It's just a different, very relaxed, somewhat altered state of mind. And it might have allowed him to see past his normal defensive structure, the defensive veil, as I put it sometimes. I think that's my phrase. Don't quote me on that. And he really felt and identified with a metaphor of a leprechaun being thrown down a well and everyone's laughing at him. And and it was very scary. I mean, he talked about how it was slimy and wet and dark, and he's being buried alive. That's also interesting because, he could be playing it up for the cameras, but that is the condition of personality disorders like narcissism, where, and I describe it sometimes, where underneath all of the bravado and the grandiosity and the superiority and the bragging and the charm and everything is someone that feels very inferior. And it's not just like, oh, I have low self-esteem. It is utter terror. It's particularly at higher ends of the narcissistic spectrum. The individual is just unbridled, like pre-verbal fear and terror. It is a very, very scary place. That's why they need the grandiosity and the superiority, because it saves them from that. That's why when I treat people like this, I don't try to strip away their defensive structure. I try to heal the original trauma such that they don't need the defensive structure. So it's interesting that he gave that metaphor. And I want to highlight that there's different types of therapy. Creative arts therapy, there's sand tray therapy, art therapy, drama therapy, psychodrama, other kinds of things, family sculpting. And what the benefit of these other models of therapy like this is that when you talk, client sits on couch and you sit as a therapist and you talk, you can kind of get into a rut where you intellectualize a lot and you avoid emotions and pain and going deeper. And these exercises allow for that and can facilitate that sometimes, not always. So maybe for Ed, that's what this did, which is great. Now, Ed has to use this to change, just him realizing this, even if it is, and I doubt this is the first time he's thought some of these thoughts. I mean, I'm guessing it's the first time he's been in that hypnotic trance-like state, but he still has. So I don't think this is a huge breakthrough. And even if it was the very first time he'd ever realized this, and so the story begins is the thing. Knowing, as G.I. Joe said in the 80s, is half the battle. So you have to do the work, and you have to heal, and you have to create a new pattern, and you have to be aware in the moment or soon after the moment. You have to start to stretch yourself. And, for him, it's vulnerability is, I think, the corrective experience that he needs to lean into. True vulnerability, where he, in the midst of fighting with Liz, just breaks down, starts crying and saying, I don't know what's happening, but I feel very rejected right now, and I'm not saying it's your fault, but I'm completely freaking out on this side. I don't know what to do, and I have an impulse to fight with you and defend and to walk away like I'm the better one, but I know from therapy that that's not going to help me, but I'm confused. I'm scared. What do I do? And then if it's a couple therapy, then the spouse knows what to do. And so, and you'd have to go through that vulnerability thousands of times before you really are changing the pattern in your personality. And even just getting to that point, I'll work with narcissistic people for years. Maybe in the first year, they will realize what I'm telling them. They'll be on board with it. I'm not convincing them of something. I'm exploring things with them, and then we discover together. And then I guess I'm trying to convince them that the path is vulnerability. They also agree with that. It might be so from that point when they are totally on board with this notion that they need to be vulnerable, and that is the corrective experience fulcrum, and we've laid out exactly the behaviors, the crying, the asking for support, the place in their mind of the feeling of powerlessness and the feeling of dependence, and being able to trust that someone might catch them if they do that. They might know that, and it might be another 6 years before they even begin to do this sort of thing, even though every time I talk to them, I say, so did anything happen? And they'll be like, no. There was a moment where I thought maybe, but it was just too hard. It's one thing to know, it's another thing to do it. It is a leap of faith, and it's very scary, and there's a big reason why they don't want to do that is because of the original trauma is still there. But, so I don't have any hope that, this fixed it. It's one moment that was good out of hundreds that are necessary typically to change.
Made to feel different and inferior. But my humor has gained me more in life than it has hurt me.
All right, so he's focusing on the humor part of it, the joking part of it. That's not the part of it. I mean, I don't know if you hear my stomach. Still hungry. I think Stacy's coming home, so we're gonna have dinner soon. So I'm only saying that because if you can pick it up on the microphone, it might sound kind of weird. But point is he's focusing on the humor thing, which I don't know if that's the production telling him to say that, but given what I've seen, that is not the priority and not the point. The point is what I've been talking about. I hypothesize. So, let's say he actually does fix this problem and he's just like, hey, I've learned the difference between appropriate times to be joking and inappropriate times. Okay, does that end the conflict between him and Liz? No, it doesn't at all. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.